Ultimately, my husband and I know that the female body was designed to birth by the Lord. And yes, our bodies are designed to birth, but there are things that we can do and that we should be doing throughout pregnancy to make labor and birth easier. Yes, it is work. It is called labor. Today, we're going to talk about preparing our bodies for labor. This is something I don't believe is talked about enough or educated on enough, because societally, we are so focused on when the baby gets here, what they need, this gadget, this outfit, this type of diaper, this type of machine, this video monitor, all of the gadgets and accessories for baby that they don't actually need. That's a whole other video for another day. But nothing is taught, or not enough is taught to mamas about preparing for labor, mentally, physically, spiritually, preparing for breastfeeding, just all of the things that actually really matter, we're not educated on enough. So I hope this video is informative in teaching you some of the things that I personally did preparing my body for labor. If it wasn't for my doula in my first pregnancy, I would have known none of this. I would have gone into labor blindly unless I just happened to stumble upon some research. But I was so focused on the nursery, the clothes, the outfits, the gadgets, and didn't even think about preparing for labor or birth and what that entailed. And yes, our bodies are designed to birth, but there are things that we can do and that we should be doing throughout pregnancy to make labor and birth easier for us, for baby, pain management, making a more comfortable pregnancy, a more comfortable labor. So these are actually things I've been doing mostly the entire pregnancy. Some of these things I start around 20 weeks, some of these things I start around 30 weeks, just kind of whenever I start feeling that I need to add them into the pregnancy. But these are things I'm not just now doing at whatever weeks pregnant I am. Nearing the very end of pregnancy. So these are things I've been doing. So I recommend starting this sooner rather than later. These things I'm touching on, if there's something I specifically start at a specific time, I'll mention that to the list. But otherwise, they're just things that I naturally do throughout labor, throughout pregnancy now to prepare for labor. Number one is prayer. This is something you're physically doing to prepare your body for labor, but you're mentally praying, thinking about the birth, telling the Lord what you want for your birth. I think God is in the details. We may not think He is, but He does care about our wishes and our desires for things in life. And I think that just praying about the things and letting Him know the things that we wish for labor, whether it be something as simple as when your water breaks. There's a lot of women I've heard have prayed for specific times for their water to break, and the Lord has met that prayer. And I'm not saying this is like a checklist of things we tell God, and if we don't get them met, we get upset about, but it's just things that we wish for the birth, we pray happens for the birth, and that we know He is sovereign in that and that He cares about those details. So in the beginning, not only praying for the safety of my child and myself, the pregnancy and the birth, but also just the little things that matter to me for birth. So this is things simple as when the birth happens, if it happens in the water, out of the water, who's at my birth, things like that. Next is staying active. So this one is pretty easy as a mom of 3. I'm active all day long. I'm never just sitting around, but when I say active, I don't mean I'm doing like strenuous workouts, long walks. In my first pregnancy, I did walk anywhere from 1 to sometimes 4 or 5 miles a day because I just had the time for it. I was pregnant in the summertime. I was teaching then, so I was off of work for 2 months before I had my child. So I was walking so much, and I know that helped prepare my body for labor a lot, because walking is one of the best things we can do to keep our body balanced to prepare for labor. So now staying active looks more like walking around the farm, walking animals around, checking waters, walking up and down the driveway with the stroller. So it's looked a little different in each of my pregnancies, but staying active and not just sitting on the couch. Even when we don't feel like getting up and doing a lot, just doing something to move our bodies, keep our body balanced, is going to be so beneficial preparing our bodies for labor. Next is avoiding a reclining or slouching position. So right now I'm currently sitting on a birth ball, a bounce exercise ball, to keep that slouching from happening, because inevitably I find myself sitting down in a chair, sitting on the couch, and I just kind of lean back. Unless there's something like a pillow or something behind my back, which I try to do a lot, but sometimes I just forget. So the problem with that is when we lean back in that slouching reclined position, we are sitting on our sacrum instead of our sits bone, and what that does is it tilts the pelvis, which will over time, baby will settle into the path of least resistance. So baby will settle more towards our tailbone than upright into the inlet of our pelvis where we want them to be for optimal birthing positions. So if they are settling back into our tailbone, that can cause for a lot of pain in pregnancy, a lot of back pain when they're pushing against that sacrum. In birth, it can cause often posterior babies. Now, my last baby was actually born posterior. She was not posterior most of the pregnancy, but she ended up being posterior in the birth when she came out. So I'm not saying this is going to completely prevent posterior babies, but it's going to prevent them from settling in that position, which can make labor prolonged, more painful, back labor, all of the above. So being very aware of your sitting position. If you are sitting up straight on your sits bone rather than lean back on your tailbone, it's going to be much more optimal for keeping those ligaments balanced, keeping that uterus balanced. It's all about balancing here, which we'll talk about in just a second when I get to one of my points, but keeping the ligaments, the muscles of the uterus, our pelvis aligned and balanced is just going to do so much for making an easier labor when that time comes. Another one I suggest is when you sit on the floor, sitting on a blanket or a pillow. So I don't do this all the time, I admit, because a lot of times I just plop down on the floor with my kids and read a book, play a game, do a puzzle, and I forget to grab a blanket. But within 5 minutes, I can feel my body's in proper positioning and I go ahead and grab a blanket or pillow, because the idea is keeping your hips higher than your knees, keeping you upright on that sits bone rather than leaning back onto your sacrum. It also just makes more room for your belly when you're up on that blanket or pillow when you're sitting down on the floor cross-legged. So there is a website called Spinning Babies where I learned a lot of this. I will link a lot of articles below for you to read more on this. If you work at a desk job, it's even more so important that you're using some type of birth ball or using this proper sitting positions. When I did still have a teaching career and I was sitting at my desk for several segments throughout the day, I always had a birth ball to sit on. I was always making sure I was getting up and taking breaks in those sitting portions of my day so that I wasn't getting stuck, because if you sit for even more than 60 seconds, this can stiffen the lubricating liquids on our joints and cause a lot of stiffness. So if you've ever been on a long car ride and you get up and you feel really stiff, because that lubricating fluid has not been able to move, you're not having that dynamic motion. So long car rides is another one. I know that's inevitable. I try to avoid long car rides more than an hour. An hour is pushing it, but past about 32, 34 weeks, to keep baby in optimal position and to not have those problems with slouching or stiffening, I try to minimize long car rides. So there's times we've been wanting to take a little short vacation at the last of pregnancy, and I just think about the car ride that's going to come with that, and I'm just like, no, it's not worth it. I do make exceptions, of course. We do have to travel to my midwife. If you've been pregnant and you realize in those last weeks of pregnancy it's very uncomfortable to sit in a car to ride, much less drive, it's because we need that dynamic motion, that movement in our hips and our pelvis to keep things moving, to keep room for our baby, just all of that. So I talked about this sitting reclining one a lot, but that one I think is so key, especially in our culture today with so much of the jobs we hold, the TV culture we have, the computer culture we have, the looking at phones culture we have, where we just are sitting, we end up slouching, reclining, kind of getting into our usual comfortable positions, but those are just not good positions for pregnancy. So I really suggest checking out the Spinning Babies articles on this for more in-depth details on why proper sitting, avoiding reclining and slouching is so important in pregnancy. Next is forward leaning inversion. So this is a really fun one. This is one I learned in my first pregnancy. The first time I started doing it, my husband looked over and was like, what in the world are you doing? This is basically a position where you get on your knees on the edge of a bed, a couch, a comfortable chair, and you lean forward. You're leaning over onto your elbows and basically letting the ligaments of your uterus hang freely. The repeated stretch of this can help balance the ligaments of the uterus. Coming back up as well is very important. And when I first started doing this, I just was more focused about the inversion and not the coming up portion. But if you look more into detail on the Spinning Babies website about the forward leaning inversion, it's the downward part as well as the upward part that lengthens and loosens these ligaments of the uterus. And that's the whole point here, is keeping the uterus balanced, not tighter on one side, looser on the other, keeping it properly balanced above our pelvis so that baby falls into optimal position before labor. And that's the whole goal here, is to have baby in proper position so that labor goes much more smoothly. I always love doing forward leaning inversions. I start them around 20 weeks of pregnancy. They're also very effective in flipping a breech baby. So if you, I'm not going to go into breech here, but Spinning Babies, the website I'm talking about this whole video where I've learned so much of this information, talks about flipping a breech, using forward leaning inversions for that, doing it a specific times throughout the day to help the baby flip. Now, if your baby is not breech, forward leaning inversions are still safe, but they don't recommend doing them as much. I do 3 inversions for about 3 breaths each once a day, and that's good just to help keep that uterus balanced, those ligaments to hang freely, and they feel really good. I feel really relaxed and balanced after I do them. So this is kind of a nightly routine when my husband and I are hanging out at night for watching a show or just chatting. I'll just do my 3 little inversions and head on to bed not long after that. Next, this one's kind of obvious, but it's often overlooked in pregnancy. Sometimes it's hard to take hold and manage all of this in pregnancy because there's so much else going on, especially if you already have children. But that is staying nourished and hydrated. That's important for everybody to do, but even more in pregnancy. Our bodies are growing another human. It takes a lot of mineral support, a lot of nutrition, a lot of hydration, mineral rich hydration. I'm not just talking straight water here, to grow a new human and keep yourself feeling good. So I think this is why so many women have complications in pregnancy as far as sicknesses and feeling bad and nausea and just feeling fatigued, is because they are not nourished and hydrated. Now, when I say nourished, I'm talking what I talk about on this channel all the time, like the whole foods, the ancestral eating, bone broths, the nose to tail meats, the butter, the raw milk, if you can have access to that, the mineral rich drinks, so keeping your adrenals satisfied with vitamin C, potassium, sodium. I have lots of other videos on this, on staying minerally hydrated, minerally nourished. This really is to a mineral level. We are so depleted in so many minerals because of our foods these days, and that's why if that's not taken care of preconception and then through the pregnancy, we have more difficult pregnancies. I've talked about this a lot, and I get a lot of pushback of people saying, well, you're just fortunate that you've had easy pregnancies, but there's a lot of work and research that has gone into it on the forefront to be able to have these healthier, smoother pregnancies and then birth. I try to teach on that as much as I can on this channel, on things you can start doing preconception and then through your pregnancy into your birth, as well as the postpartum, to keep your body minerally nourished and hydrated. So an example of that is Nora tea. This is one I've talked about probably, I feel like, in every video since I became pregnant. I talked about it in my last pregnancy. There are so many minerals that are vital for the pregnant mama, as well as the postpartum mama, as well as the mom in the preconception phase, that are so beneficial for us in this season of life. So if you didn't know, we lose 10% of our minerals stores at the time of birth given to our baby. So if we are not continually keeping those replenished and stocked during pregnancy, and then we lose them all at the end of pregnancy, that's why so many women fall into such a hard season in the postpartum, is because they are minerally depleted. Now, 10% doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're 10% lacking, that's kind of significant, and it can take a big toll on you through pregnancy, and even more so in postpartum when you just give that big dump of the minerals to your baby. So it's just so vital to keep ourselves nourished. Our diet, our drinks, sipping on things such as teas, drinks that have added salt, raw milk if you have access to it, or just drinks that have substance. There's nothing wrong with water, but too much water actually just flushes through us and flushes out the minerals we might have been getting from our foods. So drinking mineral rich water with added electrolytes, added salt, things like that are going to be much more beneficial than just plain water. I prefer sipping on teas throughout the day, Nora tea, other herbal teas, raw milk, adrenal juices, drinks with added lemon juice or salt. Things like that are my preference. And then as far as foods, y'all see what we're eating on this channel. It's nose to tail, it's ancestral, it's true nutrition. It's not processed foods. It's not seed oils and PUFA filled foods. It's not convenience foods, but it is what makes a difference in our pregnancy and then into our labor and into our postpartum. So you can check out lots of my videos on my channel on eating and foods we eat and how I cook our foods and how I stay on top of that. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it is worth it, and it makes such a difference in preparing your body for a better, smoother labor. Next, going right off of our nourishing and hydrating our pregnancy supplements. So I have an entire video from my last pregnancy, my third pregnancy, where I share with you the pregnancy supplements I take, why I choose not to take a prenatal and take more of an individual approach for supplementation in pregnancy. A lot of my supplements that I need in pregnancy come from my foods. Currently, I have been focusing on the baseline products from the company Fertile. So this is a company I introduced y'all in my last video. They just launched. They have 4 amazing products that are amazing for pregnancy. These are things I've been taking already in pregnancy, more so in the food form. A lot of supplements, if you really look into it, you can just get them from the food sources. Not everything, because our food sources are quite depleted. I could talk about that in a whole nother video, but these are things like beef liver, oyster, vitamin C, and shilajit. These are the top 4 I am currently focusing on. So beef liver, you can take it whole food form, and I normally take it whole food form, but I like having a capsule form on hand for if I'm in a rush and I don't have time to thaw the beef liver or put it into our foods that day. So that's one that you can definitely just take from a whole food source. Oysters, you can definitely get oysters from the whole food source. If you live in a coastal area, it's probably much easier. Here where I live, I can get smoked oysters. I don't love the taste of them. That's why I love the oyster capsules from the company Fertile, because the quality of the oyster is there. They aren't compromising any of the zinc. You're getting those minerals from the supplement, but in a convenient form. So that's the main thing about supplements, is learning what you need. And if you can get it from your whole foods, get it from the whole food source, because it's going to be cheaper. A lot of times it's better unless you're sourcing from a really high quality supplement company, as this one I'm talking about is. Be Fertile is has very high quality ingredients. They've done all the work for you. They've put a lot of research into their supplements, and they're not compromising on any of their ingredients or any of the quality, but it is cheaper, I'll say, to get it from the whole food source. I also prioritize things like chlorella for iron and copper balance. That's why my Nora tea is actually green, because I have the chlorella powder from Perfect Supplements in here. Also things like collagen and gelatin. If you're eating lots of bone broth, you're getting a lot of collagen and gelatin, but if you want the convenience to be able to just add a powder to your drinks or your meals or your soups, that's another supplement. But again, supplements, I try not to push supplements too much, because I really recommend whole food sources first, supplementation second. One I completely love and trust is Fertile, so I'll leave a link down below for you to check that out. And honestly, it's just an amazing small company ran by a husband and a wife, and I love supporting companies like that aren't just putting products out there to sell and to make money. They actually care about it and the value of it and how it's working and helping their customers feel. So supplementation is great. If you can get it from whole food sources, do that first, then go to supplements. Next, chiropractic care. Chiropractic care, I could talk about this forever, but I actually met one of my best friends now through chiropractic care. I started chiropractic care in my 3rd pregnancy, treated with my chiropractor through pregnancy. Now we're great friends, and she treats me now in this 4th pregnancy. So it is so beneficial, again, for keeping the body balanced. I'll go in one day and she'll tell me, "Your balance great today," or "Your left side's a little higher than your right side," and I'll think about what I have done that week, and I might have been on a longer car ride, we might have had a longer drive to an event that week, and she can tell within about 10 seconds of looking at your legs and your hips if you're unbalanced. And just having that weekly adjustment is so beneficial for leading up to labor. Now, in the last weeks of pregnancy, it's actually recommended to go twice a week. I unfortunately do not do that, because we live about 45 minutes from where I go to the chiropractor, so it's just not convenient. So I try to make sure I'm going every week or at least every other week to stay properly balanced. But along with the spinning babies in the chiropractic care, I feel I can stay pretty balanced. Hips, pelvis, uterus, ligaments, to prepare for labor. But if you live close enough to a chiropractor and you can put that into your budget, I highly recommend a chiropractor who focuses on the Webster technique, prenatal chiropractic care, and can really optimally support your body to have an easier and smoother labor and birth. Okay, next is removing toxic relationships or fear from your life coming into labor. So this is one I haven't talked about a lot, but it has been so powerful in my own life in my last 2 pregnancies. So between my second and third pregnancy, I quit my job. There was a lot of relationships that were no longer around me. There was not a lot less toxicity around me in just day-to-day life. There was a lot of, I changed a lot in how I feel about pleasing people and letting people know that if they are going to bring fear or toxicity into my life concerning my birth plans, especially since we do plan to do home births, we do plan no ultrasounds, we do things kind of unconventionally, but I realized between that second and third birth that it's my pregnancy, my child, my decision, mine and my husband's decision on how we want to birth. And we just kind of laid it down. And if there was fear coming from family or friends about our birth, of things like, oh, well, I just hope the baby's going to be okay since you're planning a home birth, or I hope you're going to be okay since you're not taking prenatals. And I just cut it out right there. I just politely would say, well, we don't have fear around that. And if you're going to bring fear into this situation, then we'd rather just not talk about our birth preferences for this baby. I'm thankful that you have a concern, but I'd rather just not talk about it. And I saw so much less stress and anxiety in my life concerning that, just by removing the fear and the toxicity of relationships with people around me. So leaving my career helped a lot because there was a lot less stress, there was a lot less toxic things coming in my life, outside factors from the world. Just removing that prepares you a lot for birth, more than you would actually think. I listened to a podcast not long ago of Noelle Covey. I've talked about her so many times on this channel. I just absolutely love the content she produces, but she was talking about people asking her how she prepared for pregnancy preconception. But I heard her saying that people always want to know what did she change in her diet? What did she change in her exercising routine? What did she change in her supplements? How did she prepare her body for conception? And her number one tip was to remove people from her life that were not serving her. And it sounded harsh, but once I actually thought back to my own life of things that were removed between my second and third pregnancy, and how much smoother my third and fourth pregnancies have been since those changes have been made, it all kind of clicked. Of subconsciously, I kind of did that, not knowing what she explained of how it actually benefits us when we get these things out of our life, out of our mind, out of our space with friends, family, whatever it may be, your job, how much freer your body feels to birth and how much easier labor and birth can be, as well as pregnancy. So that's one that I think people often overlook because it's kind of hard to do that kind of work with other relationships with people. Changing our diet, what we're eating, our supplements are easy to do, but changing our relationships, cutting relationships that are toxic, that are not serving us, that's a little hard. So that's something that I prayed a lot about on who would be in my life, who would not, what I would cut out, the conversations I would allow to be held around me if it was containing fear around birth, pregnancy, labor. I'm not saying my second pregnancy was bad, but there was a lot of fear around it that I allowed in people to give their opinions of stuff, and it just wasn't serving me to prepare me for a smooth labor. Thankfully, everything went okay. In my first birth, if you've heard that story, there was just so much to that I could go on and on about, that we won't, but so much just other people's opinions I let get to me and affect me in going into those first 2 labors throughout my pregnancy. And finally, listening to positive birth stories. So this isn't actually something I'm doing to prepare my body, more so my mind. These last months of pregnancy, my husband and I both really get into the mood of watching positive birth stories on YouTube or listening to them on podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. He and I watch a lot on YouTube of just watching positive birth stories. So I've gotten a lot of negativity around when I share my births. And I get that some people think that should be held private, and I completely understand. There are parts of my birth that I'm not going to show, that I'm not going to talk about, like the intimacy that I feel with my husband and how special that is in the birth. I mean, you can see that in some videos, but obviously there are things I don't share. But I believe in the power of watching other women birth and gaining confidence from that, and really setting your mind in a positive framework going into labor. If you don't feel comfortable sharing your births or watching people's births, that's totally fine. That's just something that I believe has helped many people has helped me tremendously. So that's why I still share my birth story. And I just think it's so helpful in preparing us for labor. Seeing that other women are doing this, seeing that our bodies were designed to birth and to birth well, seeing these positive outcomes on these birth stories is so helpful in preparing us for an easier birth and getting our mindset right and giving us that confidence and that boost of kind of adrenaline that our time is coming soon, and we will soon be in that position to bring a baby into this world, and how beautiful and natural the process is. So listening to positive birth stories, I've done that in all my pregnancies. Well, probably not my first, my last three, second, third, and fourth. The last several months, we are just listening to positivity, putting positivity around birth into our minds, and just reminding ourselves that we will soon meet our little baby. So those are my tips on preparing our bodies for labor, mentally, physically, spiritually, and the things that have helped me personally in having smoother births, smoother pregnancies, smoother labor, smoother birth. Now, I can't say that this labor and birth will be perfect. I don't know how it's going to be yet. Only God ultimately knows that. I will definitely be keeping y'all updated on the status of that, how it goes when baby arrives. We pray all goes smoothly. Safety of baby, safety of mama at home, if that is in the Lord's will. We are not against like a transfer if that needs to happen. But ultimately, my husband and I know that the female body was designed to birth by the Lord, to birth well, to birth efficiently. We don't need lots of interventions, and that's just what we trust. These are the things that I'm doing ahead of time on the forefront to prepare for that. But ultimately, our bodies know how to birth. They will birth our babies if we trust them, trust God and His design for the female body, and just lean into what is to come in labor. Yes, it is work. It is called labor. It is work for the female to bring a child into this world, but it is work that has such a reward from the Lord. We are beyond excited to welcome our fourth little baby into our family. I hope that these tips were helpful for you. Again, I will have links down below for all of the information I share. Just click the more button below this video. There'll be a list pop up of links for spinning babies, links for Nora T, links for chiropractic care, all the things I talked about. So I hope that this is a helpful resource for you guys. I'm wishing you the best if you are in your pregnancy journey, preconception journey, postpartum journey, whatever journey you are on in your motherhood. Wishing and praying the best for you, and I will talk to y'all in a future video.